everybody. So my name is Derek Yu. I'm the CEO of PureStake, and the project we work on is Moonbeam. This is actually my third Decoded, if you can believe that. And I think if I reflect on the previous Decodeds I've been to and talked, the theme has always been the same about interoperability and what we're trying to achieve with Moonbeam. But there's been this progression where on the first Decoded, it was more about the idea of Moonbeam and what we were trying to build. The second time I came, we had launched Moonriver as our network, so there started to be activity on our chain, actual use cases. I think the thing about now is that Polkadot is fully operational, right? So we have XCM as enabled. We have the development of real use cases that are happening now. So it's kind of out of the realm of the theoretical and into the realm of the practical. And so what I wanted to do is spend a good chunk of this talk to go through what some of those use cases look like and give everyone here some ideas about this early development activity we're seeing that leverages all of these new capabilities that Moonbeam and Polkadot provide. And so I wanted to start, I'll start at the end to paint a picture of the vision for Moonbeam, and then we'll spend some time in this talk working our way back towards the end again and how we got there. So the idea of Moonbeam is a core part of the vision for Moonbeam is this idea of connected contracts. So what is a connected contract? So the idea is that a smart contract on Moonbeam isn't confined to work with just the resources and services that are on Moonbeam. It can do that, but really, as a developer, when you're building a smart contract on Moonbeam, you can work with any asset or service on any other blockchain. And that's quite a new concept, right? To date, when you're developing smart contracts on a blockchain, generally speaking, you're confined to just that blockchain alone. And so just in the last, let's call it 3 months or so, these capabilities have come to market which allow you to reach beyond your home blockchain onto any other blockchain. And this is a huge opening in the design space for developers that's going to lead to new kinds of applications. And I want to take you through what some of those examples look like. Now, first, it might make sense to just talk about what the key elements of this connected contracts capability are. What are the key support pillars, if you want to call it that, that allow Moonbeam to provide this capability? And so the first one is this messaging capability, right? So the ability for smart contracts to send messages between different blockchains. That's a quite critical capability that is, and the best example of that is XCM, so Polkadot's XCM. There are other messaging systems as well that are supported on Moonbeam so that you can reach a variety of different destinations. And the other thing that Moonbeam provides is this very familiar and robust development environment. So from the start, our goal was to provide full Ethereum compatibility. That's a lot of the work, the early work we did was on an Ethereum implementation in Substrate. So that allows developers that are familiar with the Ethereum developer tools to be fully productive on Moonbeam. You can use Solidity smart contracts and all of the other surrounding tools. We spent quite a bit of time having a very complete set of infrastructure and tools around Moonbeam so that anyone coming, for example, from Ethereum feels right at home. They have everything that they need to be productive. But of course, there's more than that, because Moonbeam being part of the larger Polkadot ecosystem, being a parachain on Polkadot, means that we have access to other specialized functions from other parachains. And in fact, we'll ultimately be able to leverage the power of Substrate to extend the functionality that is on Moonbeam. In particular here, I'm quite excited about the upcoming functionality called parathreads. Parathreads will allow developers to specify custom logic in Substrate to extend kind of the base set of capabilities that they have in their smart contracts. So these are some of the main support pillars that allow us to have this connected contract strategy. And so let me talk a little bit first about what the before picture, kind of the current state of things are, so to make it clearer of how this connected contracts capability really changes things. And so if you're a team right now that wants to pursue a multi-chain deployment, there's a lot of DeFi protocols, for example, that do this. You really have one of two choices. So one choice that some teams make is they choose a home chain Maybe that's Ethereum mainnet for a lot of DeFi protocols. And then they say, hey, if you're on another chain, the way that we support you is you bridge assets to that home chain. So you would just use bridges to move tokens to be next to the smart contracts that are on the one chain. That idea has existed for some time. That's one approach. It's not great because you're asking your users to use these complex bridges. You're probably not going to get some of the people to move because you're going potentially to a foreign chain. So I would say that while there are some teams still doing this, it limits the scope of who you can serve, right? Your market. And so I think the key thing that's happened in the last, let's call it 18 months, 20 to 24 months, is that people have adopted what I call this multi-instance approach. So they said, you know what? We're going to deploy to a bunch of chains, not just Ethereum mainnet, not just whichever other chain. We're going to take our smart contracts, take our application, and deploy it to many chains. The canonical example here for me is the team at Sushi. And they were great pioneers of this, right? Where they said, we're going to deploy anywhere where there's users and we think we can get traction. And so I think Sushi is deployed right now to about 16 or 17 chains. Now, and so I think that represents really the state of the art right now. Now, the challenge with this multi-instance approach is that I summarize it as fragmentation. You have these independent deployments on each of these 16 or 17 chains, but those deployments don't know about each other. So you have independent smart contracts that are operating. You have separate markets on each of those chains. You have potentially different users on those chains. And very often the features are not the same on the chains, right? So one very common thing that happens is the Ethereum deployment will have all of the features, and then maybe the satellite chains have some subset of the features. And so you kind of have this fragmentation of the user experience, of where the users are. If it's a DeFi use case, certainly for liquidity, right? So deposits and all these different chains can't talk to each other. So you kind of have this fragmented. I mean, you get the benefit of getting to all the chains, but you have this fragmentation that happens. So keep this in mind, these challenges in mind, as I'm going through some of the connected contracts use cases that we'll be talking about. I spoke before about messaging, right? So messaging is this key underlying technical innovation that allows for this connected contracts approach. So it allows for smart contracts on different chains to communicate with each other, or for chains to communicate with each other, for that matter, right? They could be parachains or substrate-based chains. And so I want to start going through some examples here to help illustrate what I mean when we talk about connected contracts. Some of these are deployed today on Moonbeam, so they are in production. Some of them are under development, and are coming. So they're to be deployed in the second half of the year. The first use case is deployed already. So this is the Lido protocol. You can use this today. It's a liquid staking protocol. So you can deposit DOT into Lido on Moonbeam and get back ST.DOT, which is the liquid staked version of that. So it's kind of a token that has that represents the staked position of DOT. So it accrues some rewards against it, but it's just a token. And so the idea behind the implementation of this, and I don't want to go into too much any kind of technical detail, the implementation actually spans two chains. So there's a set of smart contracts on Moonbeam, connected contracts. But those smart contracts are controlling staking functions that are on the relay chain. And so part of the Moonbeam environment provides this ability for those contracts to issue XCM messages and connect and command and control staking operations that are on the relay chain. And so I just want to pause on this use case for a moment, because the interesting thing that's happened here is the user's interacting with one app, but behind the scenes there's actually two chains involved, right? There's Moonbeam itself, and then there's this very specialized relay chain that specializes in staking, governance, and other features. But the user doesn't know that they're interacting with these multiple chains, right? They're just interacting with one app that then is being powered by these two chains. And so this is a theme that you'll see in some of the other examples, that I think this is a big unlock, right? You can create a better user experience when you have these cross-chain connected contracts, and it kind of hides complexity away from the user. So this is a great example of that's in production today. I'll use another example here, and you'll be hearing from Colton at Prime tomorrow, so I don't want to steal too much of his thunder. But the idea here is a different use case that uses connected contracts. And the idea is that you have a number of smart contract deployments on many chains, just like the sushi example. You have a deployment on Moonbeam, you have a deployment maybe on ETH mainnet, Avalanche, a whole bunch of other chains. But they're connected with messages. And so the idea is that a user can deposit something. This is a lending and borrowing protocol. So a user can deposit assets on, let's say, Avalanche. The asset doesn't move. It's not a bridging operation. It gets deposited in the contract there. A message is sent back to kind of the hub or brain on Moonbeam to record the fact that that deposit happened. And so what you have is you have this central hub that now has visibility into what's happening across all of the chains. Right? It has this kind of universal scope of visibility. So now that same user can go, let's say, to ETH mainnet, and they can do a withdrawal against the credit that they had on Avalanche. And so this is a big unlock. Right? So this goes to that fragmentation of liquidity issue, where now liquidity that's on different chains can be kind of cross-leveraged and used. So I think this is like real competitive advantage, right? This protocol is going to operate more efficiently than a protocol that has separate isolated markets on each chain. So I like this example quite a bit. Another example, I'll focus actually on the work we're doing with Osmosis. So for those of you that aren't aware, Osmosis is a DEX app chain in the Cosmos ecosystem. Fairly prominent. And so they came to us and wanted to figure out a way to have one-click DOT deposits, right? They wanted to offer DOT as an asset that could be deposited into the Osmosis DEX. And so with a mutual partner, Axelar, we, and this is in development, are powering that one-click deposit. And so it works like this. So as a user on Osmosis, you'll be presented with a DOT address to deposit into. That deposit will put DOT into an address in a relay chain. That's detected, moved to Moonbeam, so it becomes XC.DOT on Moonbeam. From Moonbeam, it's forwarded to the Axelar router, so it's routed across Axelar to Osmosis. And then that same asset is deposited into an LP position on Osmosis. And so again, it's kind of similar to the theme I talked about with Lido. You have this, if you were to manually do those steps, it's like 7, 8, 9 steps, complicated steps. But the user here is just seeing a deposit address, and then all of these things are happening behind the scenes. So I think, again, it speaks to how you can use cross-chain messaging to power superior user experiences by hiding away complexity from the users and offering, these very simplified user experiences. So I like that example quite a bit. To have a more Polkadot-centric scenario, I have a scenario here involving Centrifuge. Many of you may know this project. They have a very specialized substrate implementation that handles the minting of real-world assets. And so the use case here is that as a parachain, this very specialized substrate functionality would be used to allow users to create these assets. But these assets that are created have a lot of business logic that they need to carry with them. So if those assets then will be moved to Moonbeam, there's a whitelist that needs to be maintained of which users are allowed to transact those assets according to the rules under which they were minted. And so XCM will be used to power transfers, as well as the synchronization of a whitelist from the Centrifuge chain to Moonbeam, so that this business logic is maintained, even as these assets are moving around in the Polkadot ecosystem. And so I like this example. It goes beyond just asset transfers. It shows how logic and functionality can also be synchronized and moved across chains using XCM. So this is another great example. Another example. So we're working with the team at Uniswap, Uniswap DAO, did a whole governance vote to figure out which chains to deploy to. They are expanding from Ethereum mainnet. They've selected Moonbeam as a deployment destination for Uniswap v3, which was great to see. And the key challenge they had was around functionality. And I mentioned this kind of fragmentation of functionality. So the way Uniswap is governed is via the Uni token, right, on ETH mainnet. And so what they said is, look, we want to manage via governance, via like a single governance domain, we want to manage all of the remote deployments that we're pursuing now, Moonbeam being one. And so the idea is to use cross-chain messaging, in this case powered by Nomad, or partner Nomad, to facilitate this. So that Uni holders on mainnet could make decisions, for example, let's say, change the swapping fee from 0.3% to 0.25%. And then to enact that, it would be enacted locally on Ethereum, but then messages would be sent to Moonbeam and other chains where they're deployed. They would carry that governance action in them, right? And then the smart contracts on Moonbeam would enact that change, so that you have a single governance domain that's able to make changes to any of the deployments. So again, it kind of speaks to this. It's clear now, like where you perform governance, and you have this. You don't have to make additional assumptions about off-chain things needing to happen to go propagate those changes, even when you're in a multi-chain deployment. And so I think this governance use case is a great illustration of how to use cross-chain messaging to achieve unification. I want to just kind of reflect here that I think as I start to see these use cases, and we have many more that are from teams that are starting to develop now, I do see this theme. There's certain themes that are becoming clear to me. One theme is around unification, while still being able to get to multiple chains, because you need to get to multiple chains these days to get to have the largest market, right? To basically have the largest total addressable market. And so, being able to do that while not sacrificing, functionality, liquidity, that's one theme that I see. But it's also about efficiency. So by taking this approach, you can actually be more competitive and more efficient than protocols that are having independent deployments. And so I think that's another, big unlock. But honestly, the most important thing that I'm seeing, the most important thing that is going to drive this whole cross-chain narrative is around the user experience. You can create superior user experiences by taking this connected contracts approach, by taking an approach that combines functionality from multiple chains. And do so in a way, the key thing is to do so in a way that hides complexity away from the user, right? I mean, this is something that Web 2 technologists know quite well, that users don't want to know what database they're interacting with, what infrastructure they're interacting with. So the more that we can do to hide that infrastructure away from the user, that's going to lead to better user experiences. And right now, from my perspective, it really is these user experiences that are the key inhibitor of broader adoption. And so that's kind of how I see this connected contracts approach and cross-chain messaging playing a key role in driving further adoption of Web3 technologies. Now, I wanted to kind of I said that I started at the end and I wanted to build back up to the end. And so the same kind of picture that I showed at the beginning is here again. But I want to focus on a different thing. So what I also see is that opportunistically, the short-term opportunity that people have is around connecting often multiple general-purpose smart contract chains together, right? So I mentioned this example of it could even be Avalanche, Polygon, Ethereum mainnet, and Moonbeam. But I'm a big believer in the power of specialized chains, right? That's part of the original Polkadot vision, right? I see the Polkadot vision as really having two key pillars. It's the ability to use Substrate to create specialized chains, and the ability to use Polkadot to let those chains communicate with each other. And so what I see in kind of the longer range is, these specialized chains on Polkadot, are really going to provide these incredibly valuable services that developers will be able to use when they're building their apps using this cross-chain connected approach, right? So from your smart contracts, you'll be able to leverage identity, storage, Oracle functionality, all of these specialized functions. And by the way, if there isn't an already existent specialized function, I mentioned before that to use something like parathreads, for example, where the development team themselves could add specialized substrate functionality that they'll be calling from their smart contracts. And I think that's going to be a very big unlock, because now all of a sudden, as a developer, you don't just have Solidity and the regular Ethereum tools to work with. You can extend out to building something at the substrate level that's not possible or is kind of prohibitive just in the EVM environment. And so I think that's going to be a big unlock to be able to bring the power of the Ethereum tech stack combined with Substrate together to build new kinds of applications. And so my longer-term vision, and it's been the same through these different decodes I've been at, is around creating something that looks like AWS but is decentralized, right? So you have this rich set of services that developers can use. They don't necessarily need to know what is powering them, but they can combine these as building blocks to building an app that spans, is powered by many blockchains. And so that's also going to be a way that these experiences can scale, not only get better, but it can also scale. And so I think that for me, like the environment, the combination of Substrate and Polkadot is the perfect environment for building this vision. And the role I think Moonbeam can play a role in helping this is to provide this glue, right? So using these connected contracts, you can glue these pieces together to provide a whole is greater than some of its parts experience back to the user. And so, I think, of course, if anyone's interested in learning more about Moonbeam, connected contracts, we're working right now on quite a bit of content to help explain some of these concepts. There is work needed to educate people. I think most developers still operate in this like single blockchain mindset. So there's a big educational component here that we'll be working on hard to help people understand like what's possible now that we have these cross-chain technologies that can connect different blockchains. And but I'm extremely bullish on what the next 12 to 24 months will hold as people understand these new tools, and it provides this like much larger canvas now that people can draw on, and we want to be a place where people can make those paintings. So thanks very much.